Think you know all about the glamour and secrets of Hollywood's golden age? Think again. Behind the glamour and smiles on the silver screen were stars who lived double lives, men who transformed themselves so completely that even Hollywood couldn't see the truth. From vaudeville to the big screen, they risked it all to show who they really were. Of all the names on this list, perhaps none shone brighter or faded faster than Gene Malin. His career was brief, brilliant, and painfully brief, a meteoric rise that defied the conventions of the era. Born Gene Malin in Brooklyn in 1908, he became one of the first openly gay entertainers in American entertainment. What set Malin apart was his fearlessness. He did not fit into a particular gender category on stage, sometimes performing in elegant gowns, other times in exquisitely tailored suits, creating a presence that transcended boundaries long before anyone could use the term gender fluid to describe it. His daring was more than just a performance. It was a statement, and it made him a revolutionary decades ahead of his time. By the late 1920s, Malin had become a sensation in New York's speakeasies and Prohibition-era clubs, especially those that welcomed gay and lesbian audiences. His talent and charisma drew crowds across all social boundaries. In 1930, at the height of his fame, Malin signed with the Palace nightclub in Los Angeles for a staggering $250 a week, the equivalent of about $4,000 today, making him one of the first openly gay performers to conquer the mainstream stage. Hollywood quickly followed. He appeared in films like Arizona to Broadway, 1933, bringing his powerful energy and gender-bending charisma to the silver screen. But in a conservative industry still wary of scandal, studio executives kept him at arm's length, admiring his talent but limiting his opportunities. Then, in August 1933, tragedy struck. After a performance at the Ship Cafe in Venice, California, Malin's car suddenly backed up and crashed into a pier. He was just 25 years old when he died. To this day, rumors persist that his death may not have been an accident, but no proof has ever been found. For a moment, Gene Malin lit up the stage like no other. And though history has largely forgotten him, his courage and artistry paved the way for every artist who dared to live and shine across boundaries. Long before RuPaul's Drag Race became a pop culture phenomenon, there was Julian Eltinge, America's first drag superstar and one of the highest-paid performers of his time. Born William Julian Dalton in 1881, Eltinge didn't just perform in women's clothing. He redefined entertainment. His flawless transformations into graceful, seductive women dazzled audiences and forever changed the way Americans viewed theater. And make no mistake, Eltinge wasn't an underground artist. He was a household name, a bona fide celebrity of the 1910s. How big was he? So big that in 1912, Broadway named a theater after him, the Julian Eltinge Theater on 42nd Street, a living monument to his fame and influence. Your grandparents probably knew his name, maybe even your great-grandparents. What made Eltinge extraordinary wasn't just glamour, it was perfection. He studied women's gestures, gazes, and movements like a scientist, turning every detail into art. When he removed his wig at the end of a performance to reveal the man underneath, gasps rang out throughout the auditorium. The illusion was complete. But offstage, Julian Eltinge lived a double life, the ultimate paradox. To quell rumors about his sexuality, he tried to create a strong image. Publicity photos showed him boxing, smoking cigars, and doing everything society deemed masculine. It was all part of the balancing act necessary to survive in an era his art could not comprehend. Eltinge's fame spread from Broadway to Hollywood. He starred in silent films such as The Countess Charming and The Isle of Love, appearing on screen alongside a young Rudolph Valentino. At his peak, he earned $3,500 a week, the equivalent of about $60,000 today, making him one of the highest-paid performers in America. But times changed. As the flamboyant 1920s gave way to the conservative 1930s, public sentiment cooled. Cross-dressing became taboo, legally restricted, and associated with moral panic. By the 1940s, Eltinge's brilliance was so overshadowed by censorship that Los Angeles law actually forbade him from appearing in women's clothing. In his final years, he performed next to a rack of evening gowns, pointing at them, unable to wear the outfits that had made him legendary. When Julian Eltinge died in 1941, the world largely forgot him, the man who once dominated Broadway's brightest lights. His story remains a haunting reminder of how quickly fame can fade, and how easily history can erase pioneers who dared to shine too soon. As cultural attitudes began to shift in the 1970s, Craig Russell emerged as a drag queen whose talent helped bridge the gap between traditional drag and modern drag. Born in Toronto, Russell developed a performance that featured precise imitations of Hollywood's greatest female stars, elevating celebrity imitation to a high art form. Russell's performances were marked by a deep knowledge of his subject. His impressions were more than just visual. He studied films, interviews, and recordings to capture the specific vocal patterns, gestures, and psychological nuances of stars such as Judy Garland, Bette Davis, and Mae West. This scholarly approach gave his performances a depth that went beyond mere imitation. Russell rose to international fame through his starring role in the film Outrageous. In 1977, one of the first mainstream films to feature a drag queen as its protagonist, the film received positive reviews from mainstream critics, with much of the praise focused on Russell's performance, which featured numerous celebrity impersonations within the context of the dramatic story. Unlike many of his predecessors, who downplayed the connection between cross-dressing and homosexuality, Russell was quite open about his sexuality, at a time when such frankness could still be detrimental to an entertainment career. This honesty helped pave the way for more authentic representation and discussion of cross-dressing in a mainstream context. Russell's versatility was astonishing. He could convincingly imitate over 20 different female celebrities, often switching between them in quick succession during a performance. Each transformation is complete, including not only costume changes, but also fundamental changes in body language, voice quality, and emotional tone. What makes Russell's approach particularly important is the way it honors old Hollywood while introducing these icons to a younger audience. For many audiences in the 1970s and 1980s, Russell's transformations into stars like Tallulah Bankhead or Carroll Channing may have been their first exposure to these artists, creating a bridge between classic Hollywood and contemporary audiences. One of the most controversial artists of the pre-code era, Ray Bourbon pushed boundaries that even celebrities today hesitate to cross. Born Hal Wadsworth, although some sources dispute his birth name, Bourbon's performances bordered on dangerous territory in an era when cross-dressing was increasingly regulated. Bourbon was opaque about his personal life, making him a target for authorities who wanted to crack down on what they saw as moral turpitude. What set Bourbon apart was his daring. His act was deliberately provocative. He recorded comedy albums with titles like Hilarious Songs for Gay Blades, which contained sexually explicit material that was radical for the time. His recordings were so controversial that many record stores refused to sell them, forcing him to sell copies primarily at live performances. But as cultural conservatism rose in the 1930s and 1940s, he was further marginalized, performing in gay nightclubs and underground venues where the law turned a blind eye. The final chapter of Bourbon's life reads like a Hollywood tragedy. In 1968, at age 76, he was arrested for murder and died in prison in 1971 while serving his sentence. What makes Bourbon's story particularly relevant to our list is that he has been completely erased from mainstream entertainment history, this despite influencing countless artists after him. You won't find Ray Bourbon in most histories of Hollywood or American entertainment. And that silence says a lot about how selective our cultural memory can be. Ray Bourbon was more than a controversial performer. He was a symbol of freedom of expression, a man who dared to challenge the gender norms and moral hypocrisy of his time. Though he lived on the margins and died in obscurity, his true legacy lies in that very bravery, the courage to exist as himself, even when the world was not ready to accept him. That spirit is what keeps Ray Bourbon's name alive, even after being erased from history books, a timeless reminder that true art always begins with courage. As television became the dominant entertainment medium in America during the 1960s and 1970s, Jim Bailey emerged as perhaps the most successful female impersonator of the broadcast era. His performances went beyond mere female impersonation to become uncanny recreations of specific celebrities that fooled even industry insiders. Bailey's most famous impersonation was of Judy Garland, which he performed with such precision that Garland's own daughter, Liza Minnelli, not only approved, but became a friend and supporter. The accuracy of his performance wasn't limited to appearance. Bailey could recreate Garland's vocal mannerisms and singing voice with such precision that in audio-only formats, even experts sometimes had difficulty distinguishing between them. His recreation of Judy Garland wasn't just about the voice and mannerisms. It captured the vulnerability, tragic dimensions, and raw emotional power that made Garland herself so compelling. The same was true for his other famous impressions, including Barbra Streisand and Peggy Lee. Bailey achieved unprecedented mainstream television exposure for a female impersonator. He appeared on major network programs like The Ed Sullivan Show, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, and The Carol Burnett Show, primetime showcases that brought his art form into millions of American homes. These weren't niche or late-night appearances, but primetime bookings on the most popular shows of the era. Bailey's ability to find this level of acceptance in an era still largely hostile to gender nonconformity stemmed partly from his approach to the material. He presented his performances not as drag, but as character acting, emphasizing the artistic and technical aspects of his transformations rather than the gender-crossing elements. This framing made his act more palatable to mainstream audiences and industry gatekeepers still uncomfortable with explicit challenges to gender norms. From Jim Bailey's story, we learn that true art knows no boundaries. His courage and mastery showed that authenticity, when paired with excellence, can break barriers and change hearts. A timeless reminder that real artistry is the power to reveal our shared humanity. Known as the Creole fashion plate, Carroll Norman captivated vaudeville audiences with his revolutionary performance style. Born in Baltimore around 1897 as George Paduzzi, Norman developed an act that transcended not only gender, but also racial and cultural boundaries, creating a complex performance of identity that defied conventional categorization. What made Norman's act unique was his vocal abilities. While most female performers of the time merely lip-synced or spoke in falsetto, Norman could actually sing in both male and female voices, sometimes switching between voices mid-song. This remarkable talent earned him the nickname the Creole Fashion Plate. Fashion plate, referring to his elaborate costumes, while Creole reflected the Southern and sometimes racial ambiguity he displayed in his performance. Norman's costume changes were legendary in the theatrical world. In a single performance, he could perform up to 6 complete transformations, each portraying a different female character with distinct costumes, gestures, and vocal styles. The technical and artistic precision of these rapid changes contributed significantly to his popularity. The racial element of Norman's performance remains controversial by modern standards. Although white, his stage name and performance style were sometimes racist, incorporating elements of what white audiences of the time considered exotic or Creole identity. This aspect of his performance reflects the complex and often controversial racial dynamics of early 20th century entertainment. What is particularly remarkable about Norman's legacy is that he has completely disappeared from public consciousness, despite the significant cultural impact he had during his lifetime. At his peak, he was a headline-grabbing star, but today he is largely a footnote in entertainment history. A testament to how effectively Hollywood and mainstream culture have erased certain types of artists from our collective memory. Carroll Norman's story reminds us that artistic courage is not just transformational, it's real. His relentless exploration of identity, race, and performance demonstrates that true art challenges comfort, reshapes perceptions, and dares to exist where others cannot. While Julian Eltinge built his career on creating the perfect illusion of femininity, Bert Savoy went in the opposite direction and became one of vaudeville's biggest stars. Born Everett McKenzie, Savoy created a feminine, flamboyant persona, delighting audiences with his quirky sense of humor and memorable catchphrases. Savoy's performance was the complete opposite of subtle. With his flaming red hair, heavy makeup, and flamboyant costumes, he never tried to convince audiences that he was actually a woman. Instead, he invited them in on the joke. His most famous line, "You don't know the half of it, honey," became so ubiquitous in the 1920s that it entered everyday American speech. What makes Savoy's story particularly fascinating is his influence on one of Hollywood's most iconic legends, Mae West. Known for her sexy wit and exaggerated sexuality, West was heavily influenced by Savoy's flamboyant performance style. Many historians believe she modeled her life after his famous image, a woman imitating a man, imitating a woman. The layers of sexuality here are colorful, complex, and ahead of its time. Savoy's life ended as dramatically as his own. In 1923, while walking on Long Beach during a thunderstorm, he looked up at the sky after a lightning strike and joked, "That'll be me, baby." Seconds later, he was struck by lightning and killed instantly. It was an ending so dramatic it almost seemed scripted, perfect for a man who turned every moment into a performance. Despite his immense fame and undeniable cultural influence, Bert Savoy has largely been erased from entertainment history. His bold, boundary-pushing comedy was too daring for the morally repressive Hollywood of the 1920s and 1930s. Bert Savoy's story reminds us that true art isn't about fitting in, it's about standing out. His laughs, flamboyance, and fearless individuality prove that the most daring performers often shine the brightest, even when the world isn't ready to remember them. Known as the fashion slave, Francis Renault elevated female transformation into an art form centered around haute couture and historical reenactment. Born Antonio Auriemma in Naples, Italy, around 1893, Renault built a vaudeville career combining dramatic costume design with meticulous historical research. What set Renault apart from other female transformation artists was his focus on specific historical figures and fashion icons rather than generic female characters. His most famous performances included transformations like Cleopatra, Catherine the Great, and Queen Victoria, each using historically accurate costumes, which cost upwards of $50,000 in today's dollars. Unlike some of his contemporaries who often downplayed the intersex aspect of his performances, Renault embraced the artistry of female transformation. In interviews, he spoke candidly about studying the movements and postures of women, treating his work as serious art rather than mere entertainment. This thoughtful and academic approach earned him the respect of critics who otherwise might have dismissed female transformation as slapstick comedy. His later performances included portraying modern fashion icons such as the Duchess of Windsor, connecting centuries of style and elegance through his art. What makes Renault particularly important is the way he uses performance art to preserve and celebrate fashion history. His meticulous recreations of historical costumes serve an almost museum-like purpose, bringing fashion's past back to audiences who might otherwise never have witnessed it. Despite his significant contributions to both entertainment and fashion, Renault has been largely forgotten by mainstream historians, a reflection of how society often overlooks artists who dare to challenge gender norms and redefine performance art. This is the article you've been waiting for. The most remarkable story of gender identity and performance in entertainment history. Billy Tipton was a revered jazz musician who played piano and saxophone in bands across the country from the 1930s to the 1970s. He married several times, adopted 3 sons, and lived a normal life as a moderately successful musician. It wasn't until his death in 1989 at age 74 that the world discovered that Billy had been assigned female at birth, living his entire adult life as a man with no one, not his wife, children, or fellow musicians, knowing his birth sex. His story represents perhaps the most complete and successful gender transition in American entertainment history. Born Dorothy Lucille Tipton in Oklahoma in 1914, Billy began binding his chest and performing as a man in the 1930s. Initially, this may have been motivated by the greater career opportunities available to male musicians, but it soon became clear that this was more than just a career move. It was his true identity. Tipton's musical journey took him into the vibrant world of dance bands of the 1930s and 1940s, eventually leading to the formation of the Billy Tipton Trio. What makes his story so extraordinary is how he lived his male identity fully and authentically, on stage, at home, and in every aspect of his personal life. He had many long-term relationships with women, including several marriages, and later partners said they had no idea he was born female. To maintain his privacy, Tipton told those close to him that he had suffered a chest injury, forcing him to bind his upper body and cover it up. This silent deception was not born out of shame, but out of survival, a means of protecting the life and identity he had built for himself. Tipton's story forces us to rethink everything we think about gender, identity, and authenticity. While others on this list present a gender on stage but live differently off stage, Tipton's transition was radical. Not a performance, but a way of life. In fact, Billy Tipton doesn't exactly fit into the list of celebrities who were born male, but present as female. His story is the exact opposite. Yet his life remains one of the most profound examples of courage and self-affirmation in entertainment history. challenging every notion of what it means to be authentic in a world bound by expectations. Billy Tipton's journey reminds us that identity is not the costume we wear, it's the truth we live. His courage to be himself, quietly and completely, shows that the greatest performance is to live your truth with dignity, no matter what the cost. Crossing the Atlantic, we find perhaps the most commercially successful female impersonator of the 20th century. Danny LaRue became a household name in Britain, achieving a level of mainstream acceptance and financial success that most American performers failed to achieve. Born Daniel Patrick Carroll in Ireland, LaRue developed a glamorous, out-of-this-world style of female impersonation that made him one of Britain's highest-paid entertainers. His performances captivated audiences with lavish costumes and production values that rivaled those of major Broadway shows. The dresses, often designed by leading designers, were laden with sequins, beads, and feathers, sometimes costing tens of thousands of pounds. They were so elaborate that LaRue had to develop real physical strength to carry the weight of the spotlight. Unlike many other female impersonators who were confined to small clubs or low-key venues, LaRue broke through all barriers. He owned his own nightclub in London's West End, Danny's, a popular destination for celebrities and even royalty. Princess Margaret herself was said to be a huge fan, giving his performance royal approval and lifting the art form out of the shadows of tabloid ridicule. On television, LaRue broke convention. He became a regular on mainstream television and even hosted his own television special, rare achievements for a drag performer at the time. His annual Christmas specials became family favorites, combining elegance, humor, and warmth in a way that made drag not only acceptable, but welcome in British living rooms. What made LaRue so widely loved was the way he presented himself. He called himself a comedian in a dress, rather than a drag queen, providing laughter and performance without threatening the social comfort zone of the era. Offstage, he kept his private life private, always appearing as himself in interviews. To audiences, Danny LaRue was not leading a double life. He was performing an art. LaRue's legacy lies in the way he brought gender performance into the commercial mainstream. Through a combination of sophistication, wit, and discipline, he transformed something that had existed only in the shadows into a national institution, proving that art, when done with heart and humor, could transcend both prejudice and class. Danny LaRue's story reminds us that breaking barriers doesn't always mean being daring. Sometimes it takes charm, grace, and courage to make the extraordinary seem completely natural. As Hollywood entered the conservative 1950s, female impersonation all but disappeared from mainstream entertainment, until Thomas Craig Jones brought it back with a theatrical flair that captivated even the most jaded audiences of the Eisenhower and McCarthy eras. Born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Jones developed an art of elevating female impersonation from vaudeville to the mainstream. What set him apart was his devotion to character, not his parody. His portrayals of stars like Tallulah Bankhead, Bette Davis, and Katharine Hepburn were not generic imitations, but intimate studies that captured their essence. The cadence of their voices, the tilt of their heads, the weight of their gaze. Jones achieved what few thought possible in the ultra-conservative 1950s, huge success with a gender-bending performance. His one-man show, Mask and Gown, opened in Los Angeles in 1957 and was performed on Broadway the following year. Critics hailed it as a serious performance, not a novelty, and compared his transformation to that of respected stage actors. Unlike many of his predecessors who were confined to smoky nightclubs, Jones appeared on major television shows like The Ed Sullivan Show and What's My Line, and even landed a film role opposite Barbra Streisand in Funny Girl, 1968. Though small, it marked a milestone for drag performers in mainstream cinema. What made Jones's success extraordinary was the timing. The 1950s were a time of strict gender norms and social conformity. For an artist like Jones to be not only accepted, but celebrated required excellence, precision, and courage. His legacy bridges the gap between the drag acts of yore and the modern art of drag we celebrate today. By emphasizing stagecraft and celebrity impressions over mere gender fantasy, he created a template for performers who would influence generations to come. From Craig Russell to Charles Pierce to contemporary drag artists. When Barbette took to the stage in the 1920s and 1930s, audiences weren't just watching a female impersonator. They were witnessing an artist who transcended gender through breathtaking aerial acrobatics and poetic grace. Born Vander, Clyde, Broadway in Texas, Barbette crafted an act so daring, so elegant, that it captivated audiences and inspired some of the 20th century's greatest artistic minds. Barbette's performance was nothing short of revolutionary. He would begin his trapeze and wire-walking act as a vision of femininity, glamorous, poised, and impossibly graceful, performing high above the stage with the precision of a dancer and the fearlessness of an athlete. Then, in a moment of stunning transformation, he would remove his wig and reveal his masculine identity, turning the performance itself into a meditation on illusion, gender, and truth. The intellectual and artistic elite of Europe were entranced. Barbette's influence reached into the surrealist and avant-garde circles of interwar Europe, inspiring writers, painters, and thinkers who saw in his act the living embodiment of art's power to blur boundaries. Unlike many female impersonators confined to vaudeville stages or underground clubs, Barbette achieved true mainstream acclaim, performing at world-renowned venues like the Casino de Paris and the London Palladium. Every performance was both spectacle and statement, a daring invitation for audiences to reconsider what defines masculinity, femininity, and everything in between. Barbette lived on that razor's edge, balancing not just on the wire, but between identities, between art and existence. When Barbette passed away in 1973, the New York Times honored him with an obituary, a fitting salute to an artist who had redefined what performance could be. Yet, despite this recognition, his visionary contributions remain little known today. In the smoky jazz clubs of Harlem during the roaring 1920s, one performer stood taller, louder, and prouder than the rest: Gladys Bentley. Wearing a spotless white tuxedo, a gleaming top hat, and sometimes a sharp little mustache, she sat at the piano like she was born there. Pounding out blues rhythms and singing lyrics so bold, so daring, they made the crowd fall silent before erupting in cheers. Bentley wasn't just performing. She was redefining what a woman, what a musician, what an artist could be. As a black, openly lesbian woman in an era of segregation and silence, she shattered every social rule that tried to contain her. Rumors spread that she even married a white woman in Atlantic City. An act so radical that it shook the country and cemented her legend in Harlem nightlife. But fame has its cost. When the country turned conservative in the 1950s, Bentley faced growing hostility. In a 1952 Ebony magazine article titled, "I Am a Woman Again," she claimed to have been cured and had married a man. A heartbreaking reflection of how far society had pushed her into hiding. Whether this was her truth or a strategy for survival remains one of history's saddest mysteries. But one thing is certain: Gladys Bentley lived out loud, unapologetically, and with fire in her soul. Her blues weren't just songs. They were defiance set to music, the sound of a woman refusing to disappear. Few artists could command a stage like Charles Pierce, the man who transformed drag into high art. He didn't just imitate Hollywood's greats, Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, Tallulah Bankhead, Katharine Hepburn. He became them, capturing every tone, tilt, and sparkle with uncanny perfection. Every performance was a masterclass in illusion, part theater, part tribute, all brilliance. Armed with nothing but a simple black dress, a silk scarf, and a cigarette, Pierce could glide from elegance to comedy in a single breath. He didn't rely on lip-syncing. He spoke, sang, and embodied his characters live, pulling audiences so deep into his transformations that they forgot who was behind the makeup. He performed on the grandest stages, the Coconut Grove, the Plaza Hotel, and more, places once closed to artists like him. Through wit, intelligence, and flawless timing, Pierce turned what was once considered taboo into celebrated performance. Even Hollywood's elite came to see him, leaving in awe of his artistry. Charles Pierce built a shining bridge between the golden glamour of old Hollywood and the vibrant creativity of modern drag. He proved that great art has no gender, no limits, and no apologies. And through every performance, he reminded the world that authentic talent will always outshine prejudice, every single time. What did you think of today's stories? Were there any hidden legends that surprised you? Let us know in the comments which artists you're most excited about or who you'd like us to explore next. Your support will help us continue to shine a light on the forgotten corners of Hollywood's past. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most fascinating parts of history are often the ones that get overlooked.